Hi, folks. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Paresh Motiwala, and today I will be introducing you to Richard Campbell, who has a super duper topic and building trust in your teams. Before I do that, I just want to be sure that I can actually share some initial, make myself a presenter. Okay, show my screen. I'm going to go this way. Cool. Haha, the funds. So this chapter was revived by myself and Janice, and you can always follow us on Twitter on pass_profdev, and the hashtag is passprofdev too. So if you are going to go to the Pass Summit this year, please feel free to use this code that I have given below, and that will save you $150, and some of that might actually come back to our chapter in case we need to go find a speaker or for whatever reasons. But definitely, we look forward to you joining the PASS Summit also this year. And the feature speaker, Richard Campbell, right? I think he wrote his first line of code in 1977, which is approximately 4 years before I did, so no comment. He's been in the computing industry, both on the hardware and the software sides, pretty much like me, development, operations, and Strange Root Networks is what he founded. And it was acquired by Radware in 2013 and was on the board of directors of Telerik. Wow, what have you not done? Which was acquired by Progress Software in 2014. Today, he is a consultant and an advisor to a number of successful technology firms and is the founder and the chairman of Humanitarian Toolbox. That's hdbox.org, a public charity that builds open source software for disaster relief. Richard is also the host of two podcasts, .NET Rocks and the Internet Audio Talk Show for .NET developers and Runners Radio. So please feel free to ask questions. Richard, what is your method of answering questions as they have the questions, or everything towards the end?
I'm happy to do them in line. There's lots of different talking points here, so if people have questions, by all means, throw them out there.
Beautiful. So these are the three next sessions that we have lined up for you. That is 3 keys to successful consulting. That's on May 8th. Taking back control of your work using Kanban. That is on May 22. And how to build a book of business for consultants. That is on June 6th. So we look forward to seeing you guys on each and every one of those. I promise you, we want to bring more. If you have anything more that you would like to see there, or if you would like to speak about work-life balance, please reach out to Janice or me via Twitter, and we would love to answer to you and see if we can bring up a speaker. One of the topics that we want to talk about is how to write a killer resume. I actually approached a company that does that, and they asked me, why would we want to do that for you free? So we are looking for volunteers who can actually speak on that topic. That will be absolutely fabulous. So again, just a final reminder about the 2019 summit, and the discount code is SSDISDWBY. And without much ado, let me hand it over to Richard. Richard, it's all yours now. Make your presenter. And
we're back.
And I will be monitoring the questions, raised hands, and so on. So thank you, folks.
Does that look right, Paresh?
Perfecto.
Great. Well, thanks so much for spending time to listen to me, and I'm happy to talk to you along the way. That's my Twitter handle, Rich Campbell, probably the easiest way to reach me. And as Paresh mentioned, I do make podcasts. For this particular audience, I think Run As is the one you're going to like. I've been making that show since April of 2007, every Wednesday, so we're at 600 and something shows now. And it's usually a half-hour long conversation, although occasionally I go longer, talking with a luminary about some aspect of what it is to be in IT. Sometimes those are career-related talks. Often they're more technical talks. We get a couple of sequel talks in every month or so, and it's an endless cycle. I'm never going to run out of material, that's for sure. This particular talk is a funny one. It actually comes from a podcast. Back in September of 2017, the folks over at SQL Data Partners asked me if I would come on as a guest. And I'm used to doing the interviews, not being interviewed. But the question was, how do you build trust in teams? Their particular scenario was related to a listener who was a DBA who was struggling to get the confidence of his development team, even though he demonstrated consistently good ideas on how to make software run faster. And so we talked through a lot of different aspects of that. And we went on for about an hour. And that's ultimately where this talk came from, is that this conversation seems to keep coming up, and maybe it's worth organizing into a structured format. I am going to reference some books, and I'll put them out in front of you right now. I'll start in the center with Stephen Covey. This is the eldest of these three books. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People have been around a long time. I think they're still incredibly relevant. If anything, we tend to forget about these really fundamental things. The habits break down into 3 categories. The first of the 3 categories is sort of your personal management of yourself. So being proactive, that is not being reactive to the things that happen around you, but the way you want to act on things. Always beginning with the end in mind so that you have a goal before you start moving on something. And putting first things first, how you prioritize. The next 3 talk specifically about teams and working in groups, which is the mindset of thinking win-win and seeking first to understand, then to be understood, and to synergize, or another way of phrasing that is valuing the differences. When I think about teams, I think about how people are different from each other and how we can use those as strengths. The final of the 7 habits is the one we're doing today, which is sharpening the saw, or improving our own skills, taking time away from work to work on being able to work more effectively. The first book in that list there, Daniel Pink's Drive, is a much newer book. It's got a great RSA video if you ever get a chance to go see it. But he walks through sort of the core concepts of what actually drives people. Once you get past the fundamentals around just being able to feed your family, and we're in the information worker world where we're making a decent living, and paying us more really improve performance. In fact, often paying more impairs performance. But the real aspects that drive us are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy being your ability to work on what you want to work on and how you want to work. Mastery being opportunities to press against the limits of your ability. And purpose being that we're working on for something more than just a paycheck, but rather that we make something that's meaningful. And I know that software developers and DBAs, anybody in IT, actually care about how their things are used. We're often accused of being happy to just play with the gadgets, that as long as we're in our back room or in our data centers, we're content. But if nobody utilizes the infrastructure that we build, our lives are not as good. There is a purpose to all of this, that we actually want to see our work make a difference. The third book there, The Powerful Engagement, has more to do about managing yourself, and the point of that book being that your limiting factor is not time, but rather energy, that you're better off fully engaging in your work and then fully disengaging to recharge your energy. That pushing all the time, the sense of constant drain that we have, and you hear the term burnout all the time these days, is a bigger issue. These are 3 great books that I absolutely recommend you reading, and I'm going to reference them across the course of this webinar because I think they speak to the various aspects of leading teams. And I would flatly admit, I'm not inventing anything new here. I've worked in a lot of different teams and a lot of different companies for a long time. And I don't think that there's much new under the sun in this respect, but organizing it into a way that we can act on, that just takes some thinking. But we really need to talk about trust first and foremost, because fundamentally humans are kind of wired for trust. We are social creatures. We do want to be around humans at least some of the time. And I don't have a big problem with introvert versus extrovert. If you recharge your batteries in private, that's awesome. I certainly do. But ultimately, we are social creatures, and so we were trying to find ways to trust people. And figuring out what trust actually looks like is interesting. Ultimately, it comes down to the concept of a shared set of values and beliefs. And those can be in a lot of different levels. Certainly, if we are at work, we value that work. We value what that company makes, at least I hope we do, and that we believe in ultimately what we're building. But there's more to it than that. We can grow more trust when we realize that maybe we all have families, so that we're all dealing with an aging parent, or that we're dealing with technological challenges and personal challenges. All of those things are important parts of trust. And ultimately, you want to believe that people share your values, and that in that sense, when you trust them, you are vulnerable to their relationship with those values as well. We're looking to feel safe at work. And safety is an important part of that, because we are supposed to take risks. We're supposed to push the envelope. We're supposed to achieve more, and you need to be safe. And if you don't feel safe, well, then you're forced to protect yourself. And that is a walling off. And it doesn't mean you cannot work. It's that you're not working anywhere near as effectively as you could be within a team. People that stay in a sense of defensive posture all of the time while able to work do not achieve at the same level. And work is not a lot of fun. The DevOps movement that's been going on the past few years really speaks to a lot of these aspects of making work more fun, because it is extraneous to us. It's outside of us. The team sits together and examines the work together and tries to do it better. I think a key part of that is the ability to fail. A lot of organizations struggle with any sense of failure of any kind. And in reality, when we're talking about technology, there's always a risk of failure. Failure goes on all the time. And if we aren't able to cope with that failure quickly and efficiently, then ultimately we move much, much slower. Now, it's not that failure is good. It's that being afraid of failure is incredibly toxic. And so being able to talk about when we have problems, when there are potential failures, recognizing that they don't define us, that they are simply an event that happens and we need to get better to avoid those failures in the future, that's a cultural thing. And I think it really comes from the top. When I am brought in as a consultant, I'm often talking to senior leaders about failure, and most of them will at least pay lip service to, we need to fail fast and break things and get better. But then you actually have to look at the consequences of failure. As soon as we start structuring compensation around whether that person had a failure or not, we're really creating a poisonous environment for anyone to admit to any kind of failure at all. And without the ability to fail, we don't get off a lot of opportunities to trust either. So when I see low trust environments, often I see a toxicity around any problems of any kind. Another aspect of this is the product relationship. We're often defined by the products that we're related to, and it's got its own set of problems, because products are only products. They evolve, they change, and ultimately we are larger than that. Is your relationship with this product making you separate from the rest of the organization? If you're into databases, that's great, and SQL Server is a lovely product. I have nothing bad to say about that whatsoever. But ultimately, I would hope that your role inside of a company has more to do with providing value for that company than it has to do with operating SQL Server. And so from a data relationship point of view, I'd rather you thought in terms of data stewardship. Now, SQL Server has a role in that, but the mindset of a data steward is someone who collects data from multiple sources, retains it, organizes it, protects it, and helps it provide value to the organization. And so you're larger than your product inside of the organization. There are many different tools that relate to that. And as we continue to evolve technology, this idea that you'll be rendered obsolete because a product falls out of favor goes away. Data stewardship is an essential part of every business, and arguably always will be. And so the fact that you connect yourself with that role and then relate it to products is a much healthier relationship. It also leaves far more room for a larger team. The team of data stewards is one aspect, but the team of the overall organization always values data stewardship, far further than they would ever value any given product. Let's talk a little bit about leadership, because leadership is a funny thing. Leadership emerges in any group of people. You will inevitably have some sense of leadership, not necessarily the intended one. It's a lot like culture that way. Often folks don't specifically work on culture, but that doesn't mean you don't have one. And even if you don't specifically nominate a leader, leaders will emerge. They are kind of inevitable. But leadership is really the ability to help others achieve in one form or another. And it's very different from authority. Authority is something that tends to be issued or built hierarchically. Perhaps it's by seniority and perhaps it's by role. Authority inevitably is appointed, but it doesn't necessarily mean leadership. In fact, often you will find authority toxic to leadership. One more aspect, and that is influence. Now, these three things together, leadership, authority, and influence, come in different packages. And influence, in my mind, is arguably the most important one. My goal in any team is to help that team be more productive. And the best way to do that is to influence people to do the things that will ultimately make them more productive. The advantage of influence is that you're not commanding and you're not demanding anything. You're creating opportunities for folks to do the things they want to do. Willfully working together, enjoying working together, is a much higher level of productivity than the dictation of any particular effort. So I pursue influence most of the time when I'm trying to improve the performance of a team. And again, authority is often toxic to that kind of influence. So it's a trick to not presume that just because someone has authority, they actually are effective at leading or effective at influencing people. Now, how do we influence? What does it take to do it? This all comes down to communication. And so I want to run through some communication means, especially in the technological world. I'm going to put them in the order of what I would see as effectiveness. Starting with sort of the most limited of technical communications, the text message, or the ICQ, if you want to be old. This is a very limited form of communication. Why? It's short format. It is a limited rate of communication. It is asynchronous, which is a feature. I like asynchronicity. I don't have to respond immediately. But as soon as complex concepts come across or any nuance is needed, it's hard to communicate with this. And when it comes to communication, if you're struggling to communicate effectively, change the medium. So if text messages aren't working, perhaps you'll switch to an email. Now, emails have some advantages over text messages. They lend themselves to longer format. They're still also asynchronous, that which is valuable. You can consider your responses. But I also you've seen plenty of toxic email chains. My basic measure of a bad email chain is that the messages are getting longer, not shorter. You write a 1-paragraph request to me, I write a 3-paragraph response to you, you write a 12-paragraph response to that. A constructive email sequence actually gets shorter. The ultimate response to an email that worked perfectly is okay or thanks. And if the emails are getting longer, change the medium. It's not working. Next medium up would be the telephone. Now, I don't know who uses the telephone anymore because the telephone has a bunch of problems. First is it's synchronous. I have to answer, right? It's also interrupting, and then I have to listen while you speak. You know, the previous two methods at least were asynchronous enough that we could multitask and distract ourselves and work on different terms. But to keep focus across the telephone, that's a little challenging. And we can make this into a conference call if you like, which just means it's a telephone call that takes 10 minutes to set up and sounds bad. But if the call's not working for you, well, then face-to-face is the next step up. So now we have a meeting. That meeting could be one-on-one. It could be in a group setting. But now at least we have the full set of senses available to us. We can see each other's expressions. We can hear each other's tones. We're back to another synchronous and interrupting process. Hopefully it gives us full focus. And hopefully the machines are closed as well, because the goal is actually to communicate with each other. Now there is a level of communication above the meeting. And that level of communication is pizza. Pizza is the ultimate form of human communication. And if you don't want a pepperoni pizza, I'm okay with a vegetarian pizza. And vegetarian's not your thing. If you want eggs on your pizza, fine, have eggs on your pizza. I don't really care what kind of pizza it is. What I do know is this. Humans are hardwired to trust people that they break bread with. When you eat with someone, the lower part of your brain engages. That actually creates a level of additional trust. And this whole conversation was about what do we do to engender more trust in the people around us? Eat with them. Now, there's lots of different opportunities and ways to eat. A group lunch is a great thing. If you're a team leader, you hope your team will eat together. It's a sign of trust. In fact, one of the best signs I've seen of how broken an organization has been is when people refuse to eat together, because they do plug into that trust level. And it's like, nope, I don't feel safe enough to actually be in the same room with that person while we're eating. That is a pretty seriously low level of trust. But if you really want to serve your team effectively, make sure you're having the occasional meal with folks from other teams that you have to work with. A great team leader not only leads their team, but also facilitates that team's interaction with other teams. So while the team may have lunch together on a regular basis, I'm hoping that you're going out and having lunch with other groups that you need to facilitate further trust with. What's the power of lunch? It's not just that lizard brain part that trusts people we eat with. It's also because we're not actually working. That's that one break in the day, every work day, where we're not actually doing the work. And often when it comes to building trust, your best opportunities are when we're not working. It's the conversations we have about other things, how we get to know each other, how we relate our shared values to each other. And as that sense of shared values goes up, so does the trust. And that's a weird conversation to have while you're working, but not that unusual at a meal. When you want to expand that circle of trust, there are also mechanisms you use as part of work, like a lunch and learn. Now, lunch and learns are good fun. The thing I would remind everyone of is don't overload them. The goal was not necessarily to learn whatever the content was in the lunch and learn, but rather to make it a set of talking points so that folks can discuss with each other. And the more they communicate and show that they share values, the more they trust each other. Now, a lunch and learn within a team could be exploring an idea of a new technology you want to add to the suite. Do we want to look at this new version of SQL Server? Are we happy with our current backup strategies? And get a chance to explore those things. And again, the presentation should be maybe half of the time allotted. The rest should be the conversation around what do we value in this? Why would we want this? How does it help us? But lunch and learns across teams can be incredibly powerful. If you're a DBA group and you're trying to work with a set of developers, you're already feeling like the value sets are quite different. Having a lunch and learn between the two teams where they teach each other about what they do is a great way to show that your value sets are the same. One of the biggest issues I've seen is that people don't understand how what's a challenge to the other teams. So walking a set of developers through what a backup and recovery strategy looks like, how we actually recover data when there's a problem, so that they get an appreciation for what's hard in your job. In fact, that basic statement, I don't understand why your job is hard, that speaks to a low level of trust. When you can get to a point where they say, wow, that's tricky. I'm glad you guys are taking care of that. That's also valuable. And do the exchange. Ask the developers to teach you about why settings, feature sets together are hard, what the process is for building a new feature, what a debugging cycle looks like, so that you get a better appreciation of what they build, how they build it, what's hard and what's easy. Those all relate back to shared values. And the closer you get with those, the quicker it is. I would also say this, especially about the technological world. Banish the word easy from your vocabulary. It's remarkably toxic. When you ask someone to explain to you how to do a particular task and they say to you, oh, that's easy, let me show you, they've said two things immediately. First is, What I do isn't hard. That's why I just called it easy. And second, the fact that you don't know it, I question your intelligence. Take away easy is it doesn't do anything useful for you. Rather say, hey, that's really interesting. Let me show you how it works. It takes some effort, but it's worth it. You should always be flattered that someone wants to understand what you do. And our friends at XKCD, Randall Munroe, draws a phenomenal comic, has a great particular comic where he talks about you should never make fun of someone not knowing something. You only get so many opportunities in your life to explain something, and you only get so many opportunities in your life to see someone learn something new. So grasp it, take it on. It's fun, be delighted. It's a rarity, and it's wonderful, and it's valuable, and it builds trust. I'm not a big fan of trust exercises per se. I think we generally find them fairly foolish. It's not that they don't work. It's that it's taking time away from work. It's questionable their value. There are better ways to work. If this works for your organization, that's fine. I think you need to look at your own culture and decide what your culture values that we would grow trust in. And I'll relate it back to a story of a company that I was involved in, Strangeloop, which was mentioned right at the beginning. Early on in the company, we would have Friday lunches. We'd get everybody together. We'd talk through the problems. It was a startup. We'd get a pile of food. There's always a debate about what to get. But I realized that there was a small group of people inside the organization that got very anxious about the leftover food. We always ordered too much. This is kind of normal. And they would make a point of taking that leftover food out and taking it to the local soup kitchen and making sure that somebody got it that needed it. And that was sort of a recognition point for us that this is an important aspect of our culture. And so when we were talking about how to strengthen trust in our team, how to grow it, and we were thinking about these kinds of exercises, we did something different. We went to a food bank. I really enjoyed this for a couple of reasons. One was it tied to our cultural values, that we cared about making sure people got fed. The food bank needed our help. It was a useful volunteer effort. It's also not particularly intellectually difficult. You are packing boxes, and we're tech people. We can handle this. And so what did it mean? We got bored, and so we started talking to each other. And the chatter between the various team members over the course of packing boxes for several hours is actually the value proposition. That's where trust comes from. And so we did the same at soup kitchens. And we even experimented with Habitat for Humanity, which again, a little bit of a different effort. Now, one of the problems you have with efforts like this is it is taking away from work, or you're asking people to quote unquote work on a weekend doing team building. And for some people, that's a serious issue, especially if perhaps they have small children. Now, that shouldn't be a barrier. We had exactly the same issue, and the answer was child minding. Putting together a creche with a couple of professionals so that they could bring their kids along completely changed the tone on it. Instead of the worker saying to their spouse, hey, I have to spend a Saturday with my team building and leaving you alone with the kids, they said, let me take the kids with me. There is child minding. You can have a day off with your friends, and I'm going to go do this team building exercise. That's a strengthening of culture, and it's an increase in trust in the organization that we recognize the shared value. I want everyone to participate, and we have little kids, and let's take care of them properly. Let's make our work experience a strength towards all of that. I always enjoyed putting together events where we could include the significant others and the spouses and could let them know how much we value their contributions for the long hours we put in creating a startup. These sorts of events create the inside jokes that are actually forms of poking at trust, reminding each other we've had a shared experience. The nicknames, the jokes, they're all reminders of trust. We'd give Christmas presents, but the Christmas presents were invariably related to the fun things we'd done or the odd things that had happened or even the funny failures that had occurred in the company. When we actually melted down a server, I saved a piece of it, put it on a plaque, and gave it to the IT guy who was running the show that day. Just a reminder of, we had this disaster, you were at the helm, you were ultimately our savior, and here's your award. These are parts of what makes a tight team and increases that level of trust. Trust allows us to share in mistakes, because mistakes are inevitable, especially if when you're trying to grow a culture or build a tighter team. You're going to make mistakes, and they are as much opportunities as liabilities. Being honest about your mistakes, sharing them when they occur, being grateful for people's acceptance of it, all of that vulnerability speaks to your trust in the team and the team's trust in you. I'm not saying go out and deliberately make mistakes. I'm saying look at the mistakes as the opportunity for all of us to explore the level of trust we actually have. And the same with apologizing. There is a power in looking someone in the eye and apologizing and explaining that you understood what mistake you made, how it occurred, and how it's not going to happen again. You're going to do the best you can. Saying you're sorry is a trust exercise unto itself. Let me give a few calls to action, specific tasks you can try on and explore to grow your own ability to trust and your ability to engender trust in others. First and foremost, take some time. We all have the same amount of time, right? Time is the great equalizer. How we use it is our only differentiator. I'm big on using a schedule. And the trick is to put things on your schedule that are not just the things that others want you to do, but things that you value. Schedule your lunches. Schedule time to reflect. Schedule out exploring things. Schedule out learning time. If you don't block it out, you're going to use up that time. You're going to look at your schedule, see the gaps, and say, I'm not working hard enough. Fill your schedule with useful things for you as well as the organization. Taking time to communicate. None of this is fast. None of it is easy. It all takes time. It is the most valuable thing you can possibly do, is to put your time into others. We are living in a society now that constantly demands attention. And gradually we're beginning to appreciate that the most valuable, generous thing you can do with anyone is to put away all of the distractions, look them in the eye, and have a conversation with them. It's a rarity today, and people really value when you can actually communicate with them. Get to know your team, get to know your coworkers, get to know your leadership, spend time with them, have meals with them, grow trust with them. Same for yourself. Lead yourself. Most of the time we are managing our careers. That is, we're executing on them. We're not leading our careers. You need to block out time to work on where you're going in your own career and make sure others get that time as well. A week of year seems to be the minimum necessary to have an intentional career. I usually have to take 2 weeks. The first week is just to get the noise to die down in my head. Once that's done, the second week is the week where I really start thinking about what I value, where I want to go. You can't do it piecemeal. It takes time to really think about, are you going in the directions that matter to you? There's nothing worse than climbing the ladder of success only to find out you're leaning against the wrong wall. So taking a little time, be kind to yourself that it does take time for yourself to actually explore these things, and to then be able to go back into the workforce knowing you're working on things that matter to you. There's nothing wrong with taking that time off and realizing, hey, I love what I do, where I do it. Maybe I can make some small improvements. There's always opportunities there. But not every time you do a leadership review of yourself is it an upheaval. It's like, yes, I am working on the things I want.
That's a great tip, buddy.
Take time to learn. Most of the most successful people in the world budget a remarkable amount of time to learn. Bill Gates reads a book every week. Warren Buffett says he spends 80% of his workday reading. Learning is what ultimately expands our minds the furthest. So the more you can understand, the more effective you're going to be at understanding others. And so putting into your schedule time to learn, and then take what you've learned and share it with others. Just make sure that you share it as the new idea that it actually is. Often we get into situations where we've read something that we respond to as truth. And if you present it as truth, you're going to push people back. You take that lunch and learn and actually present a new idea. I read this. I think it's interesting. I'm interested in your viewpoint, and present it. That is effective sharing of learning. It's also another opportunity to expand the level of trust within your team. Thinking in terms of roles. This is a great leadership exercise for both yourself and your team. What are the roles that we are in when we are at work, rather than products? Let's not think about technology per se, but the actual roles. We're going to have more than one. It is the ultimate luxury that we really only have one role at work. It's inevitable there's multiple roles. And often those roles are in conflict, and people's roles are different. And the differences are where the value lies. There's a personality that is meticulous and detailed oriented and go through with a fine-tooth comb something as difficult as a test plan and pull out all the details and delight at doing it. There's another personality that actually enjoys meeting new people and getting them on board with ideas and painting big visions. That's some things that some people dread. Each of those different roles being identified, living with folks that enjoy doing them, that value them, so that you can put more time into the roles that you value and less time in the roles that you don't. You can emphasize people's strengths and protect their weaknesses. And also recognize when you have someone living in conflicting roles. Because a conflicting role means that inevitably one of them is going to be done poorly unless they're separate from each other in some way. When I need to be the security guy, I can't be the dev feature guy that day. The security mindset, that security role overwhelms all other things. So can we organize our work in a way that allows each of the roles to thrive, either by separating them by time or separating them by person? Thinking through all of those different roles really opens up people to what is hard, what is easy, and how we get better. Finally, being vulnerable, recognizing that trust is a two-way relationship, and as you're trying to improve, if you share those struggles with others, and that you admit the meta that I am working on this intentionally, I want us to be a better team, that vulnerability engenders its own trust and also allows them to participate in the process. All right, we're coming down to the wire here, and I wanted to certainly open up time for questions. Those are the books that I've been referencing throughout this, and I absolutely commend them to your own reading. If you can take some time, sit down and read them and see how they affect. They're also available as audiobooks, I'm sure. The audio is a preferred format for you.
We don't have any questions yet. So,
All right.
So in this one, right, one of the things that I can suggest is also another book, maybe if you have not read, folks, this may be a good one to have, is In the Line of Fire. So, you made a statement about listening to understand rather than listening to respond. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
So this entire book is based on, how people's lives are destroyed by their complete inability to listen to understand and listen to listen, not listen to respond. And there are even some classic examples of presidential debates that brought down their presidential or presidency candidature because they totally screwed up in those debates because they did not listen. They did not listen what are the cornerstones of the objections people had. And that is what, as a leader within your team, that is exactly what you are supposed to be doing, is to listen to the words that are not spoken. This is absolutely
Right.
a fabulous book. It's called In the Line of Fire.
Is this Musharraf?
No, actually, this is by some John. Let me open up my Kindle. It's here. I finished it actually about 2 months back. I think this is the first book I've read in a long time. And the
Hmm.
other one is, which I read second time actually, believe it or not, because I'm conducting a curriculum based on that. Uh, and that one is called, first book, that one is called The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense. That is actually, it'll totally change the way you work, whether as a boss or a direct report. And the author of the other book, In Line of Fire, is Jerry Weissman. He has written two awesome books. One of the other one is the book called Presenting to Win, which is absolutely fabulous book too, because I literally live by that book because I teach public speaking and interviewing skills to people. And this is a classic two books that you must and must and must read if you are going out in the world more often. And the third one is the one I already told you. What was the name? I forgot. The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense. It's a series of books. One is for business success, other is for a success at job, and so on and so forth. So,
Great.
oh, there is a question. One sec. Oh, quite a few actually. So, excellent webinar. Great points on building the trust and sharing by Curtis Bragdon. And not a question here. The difference between leadership and authority is, that's a question. So maybe I can.
Well, authority is assigned to you hierarchically, typically.
Exactly. Cool.
And leadership is the emergent ability to be able to lead. You'll often find folks that are in authority positions, but nobody goes to them for leadership. Ask them any questions, ask them for help or direction on anything. The ability to lead is for some people to have enough trust in you to actually say, where are we going? What do we need to do next? Folks will follow an authority given no choice, right? Given that there are very, very few other options, but they typically do so resentfully. And so the success level of that is low.
Awesome. So the other one is, which is, it seems a little personal, so I won't give the name, but it says, how would you recommend dealing with trust issues from teammates? I don't know if it is insecurity, but I always feel like they are just tolerating me and even only using me for my knowledge.
Create trust opportunities, and that is go have lunch with them, see what they're actually about, spend time with them. The getting to know folks and actually seeing that they have shared values, that's an important part of that equation. So, understand that we have to work together. We don't have to trust each other. Trust is the optional component there, and if you're going to build some trust, you have to find opportunities to do so, and that tends to be away from work. The easiest one is lunch.
You're right, and I absolutely remember the statement that you made that pizza is the universal currency for conversation, and I think that's so true because I used to take my team out once every couple of months, and then grab a couple of them during the lunch break and say, grab your lunch, let's walk around the building and see how it goes, and just have a quick chat. If possible, we try to avoid having any shop talk at the time, just about life in general.
Other things. I also, you have a diversity of personalities. As soon as you have a group, certain personalities are going to dominate, other ones are not. And it's those quiet ones that you really want to hear from. That's where the one-on-one lunches become really important.
Yes, absolutely. And oh, wow, now the questions are flowing in, dude. So I love these questions. Totally love these questions. So corollary or as an extension to that earlier questions, how the heck would you do that with remote employees?
That's a great question. And the answer with remote employees is the same. They can't always be remote.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take time to get together with them. So, and then the question is, how remote is remote? So it's strange that most of my devs especially worked from home, but we got together every Friday. But we did have one fellow who's on the East Coast, and so he typically came in only once a quarter, which was enough, but it was better than none. But actually, I think the best thing that ever happened is when the CTO went to him and spent a week with him. He worked remotely back with the team. We did the usual remote call and gather on Fridays with them, except now the CTO and this remote worker were there. Once you get across cultures, so now you're working on the other side of the world, maybe you have a team in Eastern Europe or in Central Asia. I'm a big believer in occasional exchanges, both ways. If you've got a remote team in a different country, bringing one of the members to the headquarters, to the main office for a week or a month, because the stories they're going to gather while they're there, they'll carry back to that team, and that will be its own set of influence, which means picking that person is tricky. You want someone who can engage and can share and is a good communicator, and vice versa. Sending senior team members to the remote team for a week or a month has its own power. Yes, it costs money, but you know what's more expensive? A non-trusted team.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think, remember somebody had once said that the vice president of finance told the CIO, what if I train these people and they leave the company? And the CIO says, what if you don't train them and they still hang around? Right? The same thing goes here. What if we have no trust, they still hang around? Would that be not detrimental to the cause of the team, which is kind of awesome? And the answer to the question, how remote is remote, was 600 miles from this Deirdre, I would say, is a lady's name.
Yeah, so they're not going to make it every week, but it doesn't mean they couldn't make it once a month or once a quarter, as long as it's routine and that you keep them busy. They're not sitting in a corner. It's not if they're going to travel that far, make sure that it's mostly trust interaction.
Makes sense.
It's be a part of meetings. Make you celebrate when they're in town.
Hey, your voice is all
time to have a bit of a party and to as many teams as possible.
And then, can you please list all your books in the slide deck? So I would like to take this slide deck. If you can email it to me, I'll put it on the PASS website.
Of course.
Right? And along with the recording, this should be available to you, my guess,
yep,
by the end of the week. The other one is, what happens if your team members break your trust? That's a good one, my friend.
Yeah, broken trusts are challenging, and it's also, people make mistakes. So I think the first thing is to not keep it a secret. When you feel betrayed, you have to bring it up. And often it's an accident, right? A broken trust is also an unmet expectation. So you expected a behavior, that behavior didn't occur. Just bringing out that that's the truth often will start peeling the onion right away. We quickly find out if it's unintentional or it's unimportant. The main thing here is not letting that stuff fester. And so, and I hope you can be forgiving, ultimately, that there's a goal, there is a purpose to being generous with your own trust. It's the best chance to engender more. But I think we're also dancing around the issue of, what do we do with the toxic person? And there are toxic people that are not interested in engendering trust, that are exploiting the system. And they're generally known, and we've been dancing around it. One of the most trusting things you can do for a team is making it stronger by removing the toxicity. It's never easy, but it's necessary. But when you do it, the main response I've gotten most of the time when we finally move that toxic person out of that role is, what took you so long?
Okay.
I'd also say this, most people don't go to work with the intent to ruin everything. That person we consider toxic they're unhappy for some reason, and often the only thing that will make them happier is not being there. I have on occasion gotten the note from someone years later saying, hey, firing you was the best thing that ever happened. And I have been able to look someone in the eye and say, this sucks right now, but tomorrow when you wake up and know you don't have to come here and do this again, you're going to be much happier. People generally are trying to be happier, and they are often in situations where they can't be. And if we can help them get there, so much the better. It's not always fun, but it's usually necessary.
Well, I think that is about all we have. I didn't have too many questions, but it's a very healthy interaction. I really loved it. So, oops. Yep, I am not on mute. So definitely, guys, thank you for taking some time off your afternoons and attending this chat. Feel free to tweet about what you saw today, and if you have any suggestion, if you like to see a different type of topic, would love to hear that from you. So Richard, thank you, my friend, and have an awesome time. And
my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks. And send up pictures of your vacation too, man.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you, folks. Have a very pleasant rest of the day. Bye.